If Trump pushes new security changes around Washington in 2026, the effect could go far beyond extra guards or blocked streets. The White House is not just a building. It is a workplace, a residence, a museum, a stage for diplomacy, a symbol of government power, and one of the most protected spaces in America. Every part of that space can change. A single security incident near the White House can trigger a full review. Officials may ask where people entered, how fast officers responded, which streets were exposed. The goal is not only to respond to what happened, it is to prevent the next weak point from being used. That is why protected spaces can expand. More screening points can appear. Vehicle routes can shift. Public access can become slower. Public events feel this quickly. The White House hosts ceremonies, meetings, tours, press moments, state visits, holiday events, and diplomatic gatherings. Each event needs crowd control, camera positions, emergency exits, guest screening, and secure movement for leaders. If the threat level changes, event planners may move people indoors. This is where architecture becomes part of security. A building can control movement without looking like a fortress. The new ballroom fits into that bigger story. A large, controlled indoor event space can change how ceremonies, dinners, receptions, and diplomatic events are hosted. It is not just decoration. It changes how power is staged. But security changes also affect symbolism. The White House is supposed to feel open enough to represent the public, but secure enough to protect the presidency. Washington changes around that balance. That is why Trump's 2026 security push could change Washington. It would be about redesigning how leaders move, how guests enter, how public events are staged, and how a famous building takes evolve. If Trump changes trade policy in 2026, the effect would not stop at Washington. It could move through factories, cargo ships, ports, supply chains, workers, and prices around the world. This happens because trade policy decides how goods enter the country, how much companies pay to import them, and which industries the government wants to protect or grow. The USTR's 2026 trade policy agenda says Trump's trade policy is focused on rewarding workers for what they produce and making long-term economic success for American families and communities a central goal. It also says the administration plans to double down in 2026 with focus areas like reciprocal trade, stronger enforcement, supply chain security, USMCA review, China trade, and promoting U.S. interests internationally. The first major tool is tariffs. A tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. If a product enters the country and faces a higher tariff, the company importing it may have to pay more. That extra cost does not just disappear. This is why one trade decision can spread quickly. A factory that depends on imported parts may suddenly face higher costs. A retailer that imports finished goods may have to change prices. A manufacturer may look for new suppliers. A shipping company may see different cargo routes. The goal of this kind of policy is often to push production back toward the United States. If imported goods become more expensive, domestic factories may become more competitive. Workers in protected industries could see more demand. But that transition takes time, because factories, machines, workers, permits, and supply contracts cannot appear instantly. Markets react fast because investors try to predict the future before the future arrives. If tariffs rise, investors may wonder which companies will pay more, which factories will benefit, which countries may retaliate, and which products may become expensive. Then comes retaliation. Workers can feel both sides. That is why Trump's trade policy could shake global markets. If Trump signs new financial system orders in 2026, the effects could move far beyond Washington and into the way banks, fintech apps, payment systems, and order wire transfer, digital wallet, and account opening is a huge rule system that decides who can access money, how risk is checked, and how fast payments can move. The White House listed two major May 26 actions to a financial system, and another focused on integrating financial frameworks. One side is about protecting the system from fraud, illicit finance, and risky lending. The other side is about making space for fintech companies, digital assets, and newer payment tools to work more easily with traditional financial institutions. The first chain reaction starts with identity and risk checks. Banks already have to know who their customers are, watch for suspicious activity, and protect the financial system from abuse. If regulators strengthen customer identification, due diligence, or reporting expectations, banks may update onboarding systems, but can also add friction for a customer need quick access to accounts, loans, certain approvals. Then comes lending. If regulators tell banks to watch certain credit risks more closely, lenders may change how they review borrowers. The second chain reaction is fintech innovation. Fintech companies often build faster apps for payments, investing, digital wallets, lending, banking tools, and crypto-style services. But many of them depend on access to banks, payment rails, regulators, and compliance systems. If rules are updated to make that access clearer, smaller fintech companies could compete more easily with older financial institutions. Payment systems are especially important because they are the pipes of money. When you tap a card, send money through an app, receive payroll, pay rent, or move funds between accounts, payment networks connect the whole process. If new rules encourage faster digital payment access, money could move more quickly and cheaply. But regulators still have to worry about fraud, cyber risk, money laundering, failed companies, and customer protection. This is why financial regulation is always a balance. Too many rules can make banks slow, expensive, and difficult to enter. Ordinary people could feel these orders in small ways first. Some customers might get faster access, while others may face more screening. That is why Trump's financial system orders could change banking. If Trump makes a major foreign policy decision, the effect does not stop at the White House. It can move through embassies, military bases, allied capitals, rival governments, cargo routes, technology policy, and financial markets. Foreign policy works like a global signal system. One decision can tell allies to prepare, opponents to respond, investors to worry, and militaries to adjust before anything physical happens. The first reaction is diplomatic. When Washington changes pressure on a country, announces sanctions, delays a deal, or shifts its message, embassies start reading every word carefully. Cuba tensions are a good example of how a regional issue can become bigger than one island. A tougher stance toward Cuba could affect sanctions, travel, migration, intelligence planning, Caribbean security, and relations with nearby countries. Then comes the military layer. Troop movements do not always mean war, but they do change calculations. If forces shift toward Europe, the Caribbean, the Middle East, or the Pacific, allies may feel reassured while rivals may feel warned. Poland matters in this chain because it sits on NATO's eastern sense of powerful deterrent signals. China would watch closely because every U.S. foreign policy move can affect the larger competition over trade, technology, military reach, and alliances. Beijing may ask whether that reduces or strengthens U.S. attention in the Pacific. Once military planning changes, allies begin adjusting their own plans. The same decision can look defensive to one country and threatening to another. Technology policy can add another shock. AI policy, chip restrictions, export controls, and digital infrastructure rules are now part of foreign policy. Markets react because uncertainty has a price. If investors think a decision could trigger sanctions, troop deployments, retaliation, trade restrictions, cargo companies may reroute. Energy traders may price in risk. Banks may become more careful with cross-border exposure. That is why foreign policy can trigger a global chain reaction. It is not just about one speech, one order, or one diplomatic warning. It is the world trying to predict the next move. If Trump signs an executive order in 2026, it can move through the government much faster than a normal law, because it does not have to begin as a bill in Congress. The Federal Register lists 35 Donald Trump executive orders signed in 2026, and the White House executive order page shows recent orders on financial system rules and financial technology regulation. An executive order starts with one signature, but the real power comes from what happens next. The order tells federal agencies how to use authority they already have under existing law. That means departments, regulators, and government offices may suddenly receive new instructions about priorities, deadlines, enforcement, funding, reporting, or how rules should be interpreted. Congress usually has to debate, amend, vote, negotiate, and pass a law through both chambers before it reaches the president. An executive order can skip that legislative path and go straight into the federal machine. Once agencies receive it, they begin translating the order into action. But the order does not magically change everything overnight. Agencies still have to write guidance, update procedures, assign staff, redirect budgets, and sometimes go through formal rulemaking. If the order affects regulated industries like banking, trade, energy, immigration, and through offices, states, and courts, federal agencies are the gears that make the order real. One agency might change how it enforces a rule. Another might pause a program. Another might create a new deadline. Another might tell companies what documents they need, what standards they must follow, or what penalties they could face. So even a short order can create a long chain of consequences. The courts are one of the biggest limits. If states, companies, advocacy groups, or individuals believe an order goes beyond presidential authority, violates a law, or ignores required procedures, they can sue. A judge may let the order continue, narrow part of it, pause it temporarily, or block it completely. States can also respond. Congress still matters too. The real-world impact depends on the sunset surge. So when Trump signs an executive order in 2026,